Yeah, we're here with Robert Smigel, the man behind Triumph, and we're here to talk about Triumph's 2016 election special. Robert, do you want to tell us how that came about?
Well, first of all, apologies for what just ensued. I just I didn't realize how time-consuming that karate app was going to be. And so if anybody's still watching, yes, let's talk about this this thing I did with all my friends.
Yeah.
We did a special for Hulu last February, and I thought it would be funny to go to the conventions. Not the conventions. That's what I'm doing this summer, actually. I thought it would be funny to go to Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and check out the political campaign with Triumph. And, you know, what's funny about that part of the campaign is that they spend months in these first few places that have the early primaries. Way too much attention and importance is given to these relatively small states, to the point where the people in the states get to see every candidate personally and ultimately are sick of all of them. And so I thought it would be funny to go somewhere where Triumph could get kind of easy access to the candidates that way. And yet I managed to be avoided by many of them at the same time.
Yeah, well, the two ones you probably got, the one you got the closest to is probably Mike Huckabee.
Yes, Mike Huckabee was a good sport. He's always sort of had a sense of humor, and Mike Huckabee. So I was in South Carolina for the Tea Party convention, which I got very promptly thrown out of. But before we even went there, Mike Huckabee, who was speaking at the Tea Party convention, was also speaking at something at a pancake house. He was calling it a Huckabee huddle, and he was making an appearance at a pancake house. And the idea of Mike Huckabee anywhere near pancakes was too irresistible for myself and my writers. So we had to go and crash it. So we went with our puppet and our camera crew and weren't allowed to shoot the proceedings. But for some reason, his chief digital, his chief advisor, I don't know what the title was, but someone who works for his campaign on the digital side actually recognized me, which is very rare. And the only people who recognize me are real comedy nerds. And that's what he turned out to be. So he was a big fan of my SNL cartoons and of Triumph. And so he said, I can't let you shoot this event, but I'll let you meet Mike Huckabee right afterward. And you pitch him any ideas you want. So we pitched him a number of ideas, and he went for this idea of what happens in the special is the Triumph coaches Mike Huckabee on how to be a better debater. And it's all based on another reason I went into this whole thing was because of Donald Trump. And a lot of people have been making comparisons to Donald Trump and insult comics. And Triumph even was called out by Lawrence O'Donnell, and the Wall Street Journal wrote an article called Trump the Insult Comic Dog or something. And so I felt like it was a good opportunity. And so basically Triumph is coaching Mike Huckabee on how to be meaner, because that's what's working. People seem to like, according to here, I'm going to try to get rid of this. I'm going to play director.
That's fine. Yeah.
Right? Because, right, the lights are bad. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good.
All right. Okay. So
yeah.
So anyway, Donald Trump's influence, it seemed like it would be a funny way to handle this. So yes, he's coaching Mike Huckabee to say horrible things, and it was actually amusing to see what Mike Huckabee was willing to say and what he wasn't.
See where that line is that Mike Huckabee has. Yeah. Yeah,
he actually said a couple of really, he wouldn't do anything that was out and out dirty, but he would say jokes that, he made a joke about it, you know, because at one point Triumph starts handing him one-liners to read, you know, at the podium. And, you know, he was shockingly game.
Yeah. And like, here's the interesting thing I got for like a comic who's having to tackle a figure like Donald Trump. And when that sort of was like sort of his candidacy was announced, you saw a lot of talk show hosts, a lot of comedians sort of sort of like rubbing their hands together. Oh, this is so good for us. But I think there's a challenge in tackling Donald Trump because how do you find something new? And also, in some ways, he's funny enough without the comedy being added. Like often comedy, you see people shining light on something they don't already see as funny.
Exactly.
But with Trump, everyone can see the joke almost.
Yes. Well, that's a multi-tiered question, and I'll answer the first part first.
Yeah.
How do you keep it fresh? And I think most of these comedians would say Donald Trump keeps it fresh for you by constantly surprising us with new, shocking, humorous moves. But on the other hand, I kind of agree with you. I think Donald Trump's been low-hanging fruit, not just for comics, but for the media in general. And, you know, when I was on the trail with Triumph, I actually found Ted Cruz to be kind of creepier and scarier on many levels. And I found that Donald Trump's supporters, who are portrayed as universally being mouth-breathing, you know, dummies, were actually, for the most part, well-behaved, thoughtful people who were voting on an issue, not just on emotion and a personality. And they were actually trying to rationally explain why, you know, the difference between immigrants and illegal immigrants. I mean, you know, I'm not saying I'm a Trump supporter or anything like that, but I was a little surprised at the way people were versus the way they're portrayed in the media. And Donald Trump has the advantage and the disadvantage of being a sort of a crazy personality who everyone's been aware of for years and has made fun of for various things. So I feel like it's an advantage for him on some level because people know him and are comfortable with him. And then there are other people who have sort of hated him for literally 30 years. And no matter what he says, it seems to me that they can't get over their essential hatred for the guy, you know.
It seems like whatever he says just affirms what people were already thinking about him, love him or hate him.
I think people see him through, you know, what's the opposite of rose-colored? Colored glasses. I don't know, but you know, their history of disliking him informs their opinion, and I feel like it's ironic because Hillary has had to deal with this for 30 years herself. She's a lightning rod for conservatives, and here they are going up against each other. You know, the media skews more liberal, obviously, as do comedians like myself. So, slight advantage Hillary, I suppose.
But I guess like and what was the bit with Ted Cruz where you were following him around the campaign was a great moment of the special.
That was very enjoyable.
Yeah, talk us through that a little bit.
That was, you know, I don't like to do stuff where I'm actually disrupting a person's presentation. Like, you know, it was early on, we were sitting on these town halls where people are giving speeches in front of maybe 100, 150 people. And it would have been so easy for me to interrupt them or to ask a really inappropriate, embarrassing question on some level. And I just made a choice that I didn't want to do that. I didn't want us to make ourselves that much of the story and interfere with the process that, you know, for better or worse, it's very serious. And a lot of work goes into this, you know, whether you agree with what Ted Cruz believes, his people who work for him work very hard. And it just didn't seem right. But fortunately, there were enough moments where there's a great moment where Triumph just catches Ted Cruz's eye in the middle of his speech. There's this great shot, the back of Triumph's head and Ted Cruz in the middle of this speech that he literally says word for word every time on the stump, no matter where he is, no matter who he's talking to. Every pause is the same. every little aside joke is exactly the same. So it was funny to like just see him get unnerved at the sight of Triumph for 1 second. So, you know, all Triumph was doing there was kind of making himself present. And then occasionally, like when Ted Cruz was being chased by the media and other people were asking him questions, that's the only time where I felt it was okay to pipe in and ask one of my horrible questions.
Yeah. Like with Triumph and like that's been your sort of your stand-up persona and stuff for like from talk shows to routines to roasts and everything like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, really, I'm the writer primarily, and I mean, I've done some acting in like Adam Sandler movies, Curb Your Enthusiasm, a couple of things, but you know, I got my start at least as a salaried human being writing for Saturday Night Live for amazing performers, and you know, Triumph kind of happened by accident when I was on the Conan O'Brien show. When I was the original head writer there, I created a bit where very realistic looking puppets were competing in the Westminster Dog Show and demonstrating their talents. And it wasn't, you know, and originally it was talents like, you know, one dog came out and sang The Bodyguard, another dog lit his own farts, two other dogs played dueling banjos, another dog did a Jack Nicholson impression, like it was an impressionist dog. So you saw the dog's paw covering his forehead, you know, same way the hacks who impersonated Jack Nicholson, that hacky sort of classic Jack Nicholson impersonation would be done. It wasn't like until like 4 years later and I had already left the show that I called the head writer and said, I thought an insult comic would be a funny talent for a Westminster Dog. And it was meant to be done once. And then it just turned out to be really funny. And then we realized that when he comes out, he can insult Conan's first guest. Conan's a very polite host in general, a polite person in general. And sometimes when you have somebody like John Tesh or William Shatner out there, Triumph would provide catharsis for the audience by saying, you know, saying the things that Conan was too polite to say. So that's how Triumph got his start. It wasn't for like, and he was like a very popular character before he ever went on the road, did anything.
And I think like Triumph, especially someone who grew up with the Muppets and things like that, Triumph isn't the most like the greatest puppet in the world or anything like that. But he might be the
worst in terms of the puppeteering. He might be the worst.
Yeah. Why does Triumph work, and why has he been so successful?
I think primarily,
like
I don't know. It's a combination of, you know, it's just a happy accident. Like I said, it came out of this other bit. I think the accent is funny, and, you know, I'm always having a good time laughing at jokes I'm about to say. I think the reason the insult comedy goes down a little easier than is because it's not a human being doing it. There are a couple of layers. There's a layer of irony, like, because the dog is essentially like got a bow tie, like he's a Catskills comic, and sort of a corny old school one-liner comic, and secondly that he's a dog puppet, and like people are being insulted, but they're being insulted by just this ridiculous thing. Like the most high-minded analysis I read was somebody, when people were reviewing this special, which is like the only time I've ever gotten good reviews for anything. But the special, maybe because it's political and people like when Triumph punches up, you know, that's the expression now.
Yeah.
Hits at authority, truth to power, all that stuff, instead of just hitting poor Star Wars nerds. But anyway, they compared Triumph to like the Shakespearean fool, like, because he's like so low status that he can say anything about anybody and nobody's really offended, you know. And the low status continues beyond the puppet and out of his ass when you follow the arm to this face, and the guy's on his knees most of the time because he's trying to avoid being in the shot. It's fairly degrading for me too. So
yeah,
people don't necessarily feel that bad to be insulted by this.
Yeah. I've done a little bit of puppet work, like just stuff like school things and church things and stuff like that. And I'm a big believer in puppets can get away with stuff that people can't.
Yeah.
And I think, like, even thinking about even that thing where you did the stuff with the Star Wars nerds back for episode 1, when that came out, it's surprising how many of the people that Triumph was making fun of were able to laugh at themselves.
Oh yeah, that was the most enjoyable experience I've ever had doing Triumph, because I'm not really that, you know, I mean, I've just sort of painted myself into this corner, but with this character, but I don't particularly relish making people uncomfortable. I love the Star Wars experience because a lot of those people, being nerds, were Conan fans. So late night comedy fans. So they knew Triumph very well, and it felt like they were excited about being made fun of by Triumph the way I would have been to be made fun of by Don Rickles, which happened as well when I was a producer at Conan and he was a guest. And I walked into his dressing room to say hello, and he looks at me and he says, "Hello, Rabbi." Just couldn't have made me happier. I'm sure he's done it for many Jews before and since, but I felt special. Yeah.
When it's whether it's Star Wars nerds or presidential candidates or a Conan OBrien who's interviewing Triumph, what like are you looking for from them? Like, what's the best way to react or respond to Triumph?
How would I advise somebody to react to Triumph?
I think maybe not even advise as much as what are you looking for as a performer? Like, what sort of response do you want?
Honest response, I think. If people are trying to do a bit too much, then it sort of goes off the tracks. And but that doesn't happen very much. People are pretty hip to what's going on, and they just talk to Triumph as if he's a real reporter, which is really what makes it funny. A part of what I enjoy about Triumph's insults is that I'm reporting most of the time, and so the insults often come in the form of questions, which is enjoyable to me. It's not quite as direct, and it's somehow funnier and meaner in an unintended way. To ask the rhetorical kind of questions Triumph asks.
Yeah. How did I hold up, Robert?
Well, you with Triumph?
Yeah.
I think I'd say you kept it. You kept it at the level that Gold Derby viewers have come to expect.
That's a very diplomatic and good answer, Robert.
It's a huge compliment. It's a huge compliment.
Yeah, thank you. Anyway, what's the one thing you're sort of taking away from? Well, actually, sorry. What's the one thing you're taking away from this election special? Like, what's the thing that you're most proud of from that?
Oh, from this special, I'm proud that we were able to not preach. I feel like we were funny without being high-minded and hitting obvious targets too hard. I mean, we hit, obvious targets in our silly way. Like, I think there are 2 long segments, both devoted to Chris Christie's weight, and and it's not like we don't make fun of Donald Trump for the things people make fun of Donald Trump for, but I think we found other ways to do it, and I really liked that it didn't completely skew on one side or the other. We went to New Hampshire and did a whole segment about political correctness at colleges that was probably the funniest segment, a lot of people thought, in the whole show. And with Triumph, I try really hard, especially when we get into politics, is to, oddly enough, I want Triumph to be above the fray and not too emotional or serious about what's going on, no matter what I think or my writers or anybody else. I want it to be funny above everything. Still make some points, but objective number 1 is to be as funny as possible.
And you said you are going to the conventions over summer?
We are. We're planning to. The Hulu wants me to do another special this summer. And Lord willing, we'll get in and we won't get thrown out.
Yeah, it could be a barn burner.
It could be. It could be. Both of them. Yeah. Barns could be burned. Barns could be burned. Crosses. Any number of things could be burned at these events.
Yeah. They could be very exciting conventions, so that's really exciting to see what Triumph gets up to down there. Well, Robert, thanks for chatting with us. All the best for
Thanks very much.
yeah, all the best for the Emmys and the election special and stuff like that.
I mean, you know. Yeah.
And thank Triumph for me. That was a lot of fun chatting with him.
I am sincerely rooting for Bobby Flay and Guy Fieri.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. That's it.